Alrighty, so let's look into neurohistology and the different types of neuron cells. So let's first look at neural tissue. So neural tissue is comprised of two things: the neuron and the neuroglia. So the neuroglia, this is your supporting cells, and they're the ones that can mitose. The neuron, on the other hand, is the nerve cell, and this one loses its ability to mitose. And so the neurons, once you've made them, their connections can change, but once a neuron dies, it's done. And so typically they have a cell body, which is this right here. This is their cell body. They're going to have a nucleus. I'm sorry, that's the nucleolus. This is the nucleus. Typically you're going to see some ER. These little guys dangling outside of the dendrites. The spaces that are between these big gaps are the nodes of RMVA. And now, if this were a neuron that was found in the peripheral nervous system, these little dots right here would symbolize Schwann cells. And Schwann cells are going to be what's found in the PNS. Now, oligodendrocytes, they're what's found in the CNS, on the other hand. So just keep in mind that the myelinated version of the neurons that are found in the CNS and PNS, they have different names. CNS is the oligodendrocytes, which I remembered as CO, and Schwann cells, or PS, are in the PNS. These bigger bubbles are the myelin sheath, and just keep in mind, the myelin sheath are these fatty concentric coatings that are basically wrapping around each of these axon terminals. Between each of the nodes of RNVA. So as the axon passes through here, we have these concentric myelin sheaths that are basically like sheets of fat that are wrapping around themselves. So if you think of electric tape when you're wrapping it around the wire, it's kind of like the same thing. This is going to wrap around several times, and this is going to allow for higher conductance and a greater speed for the potential to go from the dendrite all the way to the axon terminal. Then we have the axon terminal, which are these things at the end right here. And so another thing you need to know is basically the dendrites are the site of receiving information, and as it goes down, it's going to be these axon terminals that are going to send it to the next dendrite. So this is the transmitting end, this is the receiving end. And in terms of dendrites, you can simply have one dendrite or multiple dendrites, and we're going to go over these different types of neurons next. And so the neuron itself can be myelinated or non-myelinated. If you want faster conductance, the best thing to have is myelin to ensure that it's going to be an instantaneous response. Now, two other terms that are good to know are the nucleus and ganglion. Now, nucleus is a term that's found in the CNS. Ganglion is going to be found in the PNS. And both mean the same thing. They're a collection of neuron cell bodies. But it's important, specifically for exams, to be able to distinguish these two cells. And so let's look back at our neuron right here. The nucleus is going to be large, spherical, and it's centrally located. It's going to have a high amount of euchromatin, and it's large and prominent. It's going to have a larger and prominent nucleolus. The cytoplasm is going to be the site for a lot of protein synthesis, which automatically means that you're going to have a lot of endoplasmic reticulum. This does have an actin cytoskeleton, which comprises also neurofilament and microtubules, and this is mainly to ensure the support and maintain shape of the axon. Another thing to note is that 20% of the nutrition that comes from the body in terms of energy is going to be used strictly to provide energy for your neurons. 11% of your cardiac output, meaning 11% of the work that the heart does, is dedicated to the neurons. So the next thing is, what are the types of neurons that we're going to see? Well, in the peripheral nervous system versus the central nervous system and PNS. So in the PNS, we're going to have unipolar and bipolar. In both the CNS and PNS, we'll see multipolar. So this first guy we have right here is what's called the unipolar. And if you look at it, or it's also known as, pseudo unipolar. And these are basically what's seen in sensory neurons. They're going to be found when you're looking at the dorsal root ganglion. If you remember in the gross anatomy videos, I mentioned the idea of the spinal reflex, and also if you think back to the vertebral column, well, we have the spinal cord here, and the dorsal root ganglion was right here, where we have the dorsal root connecting into it, and this is basically what led to the integrating center. And so this is the type of cell that's seen in this dorsal root ganglion, and it's also associated with sensory ganglion, with cranial nerves, and we're going to get into cranial nerves a little later. And so what we're seeing is a spherical cell bodies with one pole, and it's going to have short or bifurcate into peripheral processes. So as you see, there's one pole, and it's bifurcating into the two processes over here. Next is the bipolar, and the bipolar, bi meaning two, so it has two poles. You have this oval-shaped cell body in the center with the two poles at the ends, and this is special sensory. And what special sensory means is like your smell, your sight, hearing. These are the type of cells that are going to be involved. Specifically, you see a lot of bipolar cells in your eyes, and they're going to give off to peripheral and central processes. Next is the multipolar, and this is the most abundant. And if you remember, I said that this is found in the CNS and the PNS. Well, seeing that they're both in the peripheral and central nervous system, you'd expect that this is the most abundant of the neuron types. And it has a variety of shapes. It can be pyramidal, pear-shaped, and stellate. Stellate meaning star-shaped. And if you remember in the last video, we talked about the pyramidal neurons, and that's basically these. Here are the dendrites that are here, and then the axon terminals at the end. And so these kind of strange-looking multipolar cells are going to be the ones that are really seen throughout the CNS and PNS. They're going to have many poles, many dendrites, but they're going to specifically have one axon. And these three are your basic types of neurons. Next we have what are called under the Neuroglia. So the Neuroglia has two classifications. It has the Macroglia and the Microglia. So the first one is the astrocytes. And the astrocytes, it has a nucleus in the center. And the astrocytes are basically what's involved in the blood-brain barrier. They're the ones that really create the blood-brain barrier. They're fibrous in the white matter and protoplasmic in the gray matter. And they're located between the brain capillaries and the neurons. So if you look at it, it has these perivascular feet. And they're going to basically attach or cling on to the blood vessels. And so the function of this is when they're attached to the basement membrane, they're going to cover 80% of the capillary surface. And this is just to control what goes towards the brain and what remains outside. They provide nutrients for neurons, and they're maintaining the extracellular ion, neurotransmitter, and metabolic balance. And when we're talking about gliomas, just remember glioma is basically some sort of problem with your astrocytes. So it's a big problem there. The next macroglia is your oligodendrocyte, which we've already talked about being in your central nervous system and that it's myelinated. The big difference between the Schwann cells and the oligodendrocytes, a single oligodendrocyte can attach to 50 axons, while a Schwann cell, it's only one that I can attach to. So that's a big difference between the two systems. And lastly, we have the microglia. And the microglia are the macrophages. These are going to be what basically are going to protect the brain from any viruses, bacteria, or toxins. And if we were to have some sort of deficiency or problems with the microglia, this could potentially lead to Alzheimer's or Parkinson's. Now, in terms of the Schwann cells and oligodendrocytes, demyelinated disease that you should know is MS. And it basically blocks the messengers between the brain in the body leading to multiple sclerosis. And some of the symptoms are visual disturbances, muscle weaknesses, or trouble with coordination. Well, if you have any questions or comments, please leave them below. If you like the video, please hit the thumbs up. And please subscribe to my channel. Also, if you want to grab the notes for this video, or if you want to grab this picture, there's a link below.